With the 2023 NBA Draft Lottery order set, it's time to do my 2023 NBA Mock Draft 6.0. Like with all my mock drafts, this is based off what I would do, not what I think will happen, not what others think will happen, not what others people's opinions about prospects are, what my opinions are. So keep that in mind if you see something that you don't expect. Some things will change a bit based off the order and what I would do with each pick, but let's get into it. We don't have to spend too much time on this. We know what's going to happen. They might as well have announced the pick the moment the Spurs won the lottery. They're going to take the franchise player of the future, potentially the face of the NBA in Victor Wembanyama, someone who has the potential to be the best player in the NBA one day, and I don't say that lightly. The best prospect we have seen since Luka and LeBron, and be set for the next decade plus. He's an absolute alien. He's worth every bit of the hype in my opinion. He has a chance to be like all-star good as a rookie, which I don't say lightly. And the Spurs, they did it again. They get their next franchise player with the first overall pick, and they'll be set for the next decade. Maybe like 15, 20 years from now, they'll get the 15th pick and draft the next Kawhi Leonard for all we know, because that would be our luck. But Victor Wembanyama is worth the first pick. He's going number one. There's no draft, in my opinion, where he wouldn't go first in the last 10 years. That's how good he is. I know some people think it's hype, but he's that good, and I think he's going to be a very special player for a very long time. I know there's some debate about the second overall pick because of the players in place with the Hornets right now, but you guys know me, Scoot Henderson is my easy number 2 prospect in this class, and I don't think it's close. There is a gap between him and number 3 and number 4 in my opinion. You take a high-feel, high-skill, freak athlete point guard, and you make it work next to LaMelo. If they tried Devontae Graham and Terry Rozier next to LaMelo, they should be willing to try Scoot Henderson next to LaMelo. Scoot would be the number 1 prospect in most other years. I have a higher prospect grade on him than I had with Paolo Banchero, Cade Cunningham, and LaMelo Ball, who were all the number 1 prospect on my board grade-wise in their respective drafts. I know LaMelo didn't go first overall, but I had a higher grade on him than I had with Anthony Edwards because prospect Anthony Edwards was kind of rough. But regardless of that, Scoot should be the pick here. I think LaMelo is a smart enough player, and I think Scoot Henderson is a smart enough player to make it work when you have 2 high-field players. They should be able to figure it out eventually. There's going to be growing pains, but that's to be expected. They're both extremely young. Scoot is also a high-character guy. He's a stable presence in the locker room. He's been praised for his leadership ability and maturity at such a young age, and the Hornets kind of need something like that. And he's a very good prospect. Someone I think has all-NBA potential, borderline like MVP franchise player potential. I wouldn't go quite there, but I do think all-NBA is definitely in the cards. And when you're picking second overall, you draft the best player available. You don't draft for fit when there is a gap between what you think is the fit versus best available. Now granted, the NBA might view it differently. I understand, and from what I've heard, the NBA is higher on Brandon Miller than I am, so I do think Brandon Miller is in play at pick 2. But for me, there is a bigger gap. Not to say Brandon Miller isn't good. We're going to talk about him very soon because he's going to go super high. But Scoot Henderson will be able to change that franchise more, in my opinion. And again, you're picking second overall, and for the Hornets in particular, they should know how this works based off how they got LaMelo. The Portland Trail Blazers are up at pick 3, and they're going to have to keep this pick. I'm not doing trades. I'm also assuming they're going to keep Damian Lillard. And I think Brandon Miller is the correct pick here based off what you're going to do. I do think if they trade the pick, Amen Thompson will be in play here, or if they trade Damian Lillard, Amen Thompson will be in play here. But assuming that they keep the pick and they're keeping Damian Lillard as well, Brandon Miller would be the pick here for me. And even regardless of that, I would still heavily consider him here, even though it's close between him and Amen. Miller is a high floor prospect. I don't see many outcomes where he doesn't work out in the NBA. He can shoot the basketball. He's a really good defender. He's a growing passer. He can be a secondary passer right away, in my opinion. He's tall. Like, he just does a lot of things well, to the point where the floor and the baseline of that floor is very high. He is a bit older for a freshman. I don't worry too much about that. He's going to be 21 as a rookie. 21-year-olds are far from finished products, in my opinion. So that doesn't bother me too much. I am worried a bit about the finishing. It did get better throughout the year, but at the same time, there still were moments like he should be able to finish, but he doesn't. And I understand he had a bad March Madness. He was dealing with injuries. But even then, the finishing concerns are still there. Not a great separator in terms of self-creation, which is why I hold back on the Paul George, Jason Tatum, Brandon Ingram comparisons, per se. But I really like him a lot. At the very least, he reminds me like of Trey Murphy. And at the very least, you're getting Trey Murphy, that's a good pick. And I do think a Rashard Lewis type player who, in my opinion, Rashard would be all-NBA good in today's NBA. But a 6'10" guy that can shoot, play defense, somewhat create for himself. I like that for Brandon Miller. He's a player that can contribute right away if you're going in one direction. He can be a good pick for the future. I think he's going to be a really good player. So there's no downside to taking Miller here, even if I think someone else has a higher ceiling, per se. And we'll talk about him soon. But Brandon Miller, he's going to fit well. He fits well with Damian Lillard. He also fits well, if they trade Damian Lillard and they're building around Simons and Sarp. He fits well with that, in my opinion. So I think he should be the pick at 3 for the Blazers with Amen in consideration. But, again, I think Amen's a better prospect. But I also really like what Brandon Miller brings to the table. And I just think that given what they have with their young pieces, it just makes more sense to take him. And I don't think the gap between Miller and Amen is too much of a gap for me to claim this is a pick for fit over best available. They're both very good. The Houston Rockets are a pick 4, and they're going to sprint the pick of Amen Thompson up. They need a point guard. And to me, Amen Thompson is the second best point guard in this class. He's 6'6", 215 pounds, 7-foot wingspan, freak athlete, can jump at the gym, has incredible vertical range. He's somebody that has unreal flexibility and body control. Somebody that is also this very high feel. His ability to make plays in mid-air reminds me of Ja Morant. As a basketball player, obviously. But, Ja has that ability to make plays, jump up and while mid-air, find an open player and make the pass. Amen Thompson can do that as well. And he's also a great slasher that can attack the basket and a really good defender, really good feel, really good instincts. Obviously, the freakish athleticism and his ability as far as motor goes is really good on both ends of the floor. Needs to work as a shooter. That's the one thing that he needs to work on. It's not like Ben Simmons, I'll say that. He's way more willing to shoot than Ben Simmons ever was. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. His motor runs hot. He has a drive to be great. You can hear it in the way he talks in interviews, the way he carries himself on the court, which is also true for his twin brother. I just think that you need a primary creator for Houston. You need a point guard that isn't Kevin Porter Jr. Get one of the highest field playmakers in the draft. In my opinion, the best overall playmaker in this class is Amen Thompson. Put him next to Jalen Green. You immediately have the most athletic backcourt in the league. And you figure it out. The shot does have to come along, but he's shown improvement in that area over the last year alone. And I don't know if he'll ever be a great shooter, but I don't think the fact that he's not a good shooter right now when he's shown willingness and has shown that he is going to put in the work to improve when everything else. Lockdown defense, elite playmaking, elite athleticism at 6'6", 6'7", 215 pounds, long arms, everything else is there with him. And he's shown a willingness to work on the one area that he needs to work on. So I would take him at 4. He would be an excellent primary option of the future, and I wouldn't think twice about it. The Detroit Pistons got absolutely screwed over. They won 17 games, the only team in the league to not break the 20-win threshold mark, and they fell to the 5th pick, which was like the worst possible scenario for them. But with that being said, they still get a good player in my opinion, and Cam Whitmore. Cam Whitmore is one of the more high upside picks in this draft in my opinion. He's one of the younger players, but one of the most physically ready to play NBA basketball right now. He's like 6'7", he weighs 230 pounds, really long arms, freakish athlete, best second jump in this class. His ability to like jump up, get back down, and jump up again is second to none in this class, and one of the best I've ever seen from a prospect, on top of again being extremely young, one of the youngest players in this draft. But he's more than just a great athlete, even though he is, in my opinion, the best power athlete in this class. Probably the best power athlete in terms of one-and-done prospects we've seen since Zion. I am not saying that he is Zion Williamson as a prospect. Zion is one of the 3 best prospects I've ever evaluated. In fact, the only prospects I have ahead of Scoot Henderson are Wemby, Luka, and Zion. So I'm not saying Cam Whitmore is that, but he is a high motor player. He puts some work on the boards. He has a lot of skill as far as upside goes. Like, he can grow and expand. I like his potential as a shot creator, a slasher, a rim presser threat. Needs some work as a passer, but outside of that, he has a lot of like star intangibles to him, and he would fit well with this Pistons team as a transition threat with Cade Cunningham running the show, and like running alongside like Jaden Ivey of all people. Like, you have like a really good like wing guard duo between Ivey and Whitmore as far as athleticism goes, like a thunder lightning type of duo. And I think he would work well with Jalen Duren, because I don't think like he would clog the paint that much. So it just makes sense. He can play the 3, he can play the 4. Those are the positions I think the Pistons need most. I think they're set at the guard spot with Cade and Ivey. I think they're set at their big spot with Jalen Duren. So getting a 3 or a 4, which is like their big needs right now. Bogdanovic is a good player, not a long-term fit. He's a bit older, doesn't really fit the timeline. So get Cam Whitmore because they lost Sadiq Bey. They didn't lose him. They traded him away. Wiseman's not a 4, so get Cam Whitmore. High upside player. I think he has a higher 4 than given credit for, and it just makes a lot of sense to take him here. The Magic are going to take Asar Thompson at pick 6. This is the perfect fit in the draft. I think that the Magic should walk away with at least one Thompson twin. It's going to be Asar more than likely. It would be Amen if Amen was still here. I don't think Amen's going to make it to this pick, obviously, but Asar I think could. And he's just an awesome, like, connecting, like, wing. He's somebody that is a high field player. I would say I don't think he has primary upside like Amen, because Amen, his feel as a primary creator is just higher. The creativity with him as a passer is just higher. But Asar can be an awesome like connecting playmaker, somebody that would fit well with Franz and Paulo as like this transition threat, elite defender, somebody that is growing as a shooter. I actually think he's a lot further along as a shooter than Amen, but he still needs work. But like with Amen, he's also putting in the work to improve in the area that he knows will need to improve if he wants to be a good NBA player. But what he does defensively is really good. It fits what the Magic like. They like, those versatile, connecting, long-armed, two-way kind of players, and that's what Amen is. I think Amen would fit perfectly with what they have. Like, you can put him with Fultz. I think he would be an upgrade over Jalen Suggs. Cole Anthony's obviously coming off the bench, so like that doesn't matter too much, but he fits well with what they have as far as like starting options go. And I think that he would be a really good player for them for a long time, and they're going to be scary. Orlando was already like on the brink of borderline play-in team, they played a lot better than the record suggested. I think because they had such a poor start to the season, people don't realize they played like, I believe it was like slightly above 500 basketball like after their first 20 games where they were abysmal. So they're going to be a better team than people think with Franz and Paulo, and getting a guy like Asar would be a great piece to get. And that's just one piece. They have another pick at pick 11 that we'll talk about later, but Asar would be the big piece, the piece that I think they should use on a potential starter, and I think Asar would be a starter on this team. So that would be the pick here. It just makes too much sense. I love this pick for the Pacers, the same way I feel about Asar to Orlando. Jarvis Walker to Indiana makes so much sense. He's a high field player. He's physically ready to play NBA basketball. He was better than his numbers suggested in college, hoping immediate impact as a defender. In my opinion, he is the best defender not named Victor Wembanyama in this draft, which means that if there wasn't this basketball alien that was beyond the concepts of the reality of the sport in this draft, Jarvis Walker would be the best defensive player in this draft. He's high field, he can play multiple coverages, he's a really productive and high motor defender, and on offense, I think he has more potential than the numbers suggest. I think he has potential to be a really good rim guy. I think he has potential to be more of a creator than people think. He's a really good passer, and you just look at what he does from a physical standpoint and from a field perspective, and it would fit really well with Halliburton. I would love to see like a P&R action between Halliburton and Jarvis Walker, because that's like a combination of two high field players that can do a lot of things. Now Jarvis does need to grow as a shooter. He did flash some potential, but the question with Jarvis is how much was his like lack of production in college about him, and how much of it was about the fact that he played on a really good college team, like one of the best teams in the country. That's a question that will have to be answered, and I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I also think it wouldn't shock me if he's like Scotty Barnes, where he puts up okay numbers in college, but they don't pop off the page because he plays on a good team or plays in a certain system, but he'll put up better numbers as a rookie in the NBA. I don't know if he'll be rookie of the year like Scotty Barnes was, or as good as Scotty Barnes was as a rookie. Scotty Barnes had an incredible rookie year, but I do think in a similar way, like the numbers will be better. And I think it's a really good fit with the Pacers, especially with Halliburton and Mathurin, who are scorers, and Jarvis is a player that doesn't need to score to be an impact guy, but can score as well. So having a guy like that when you are trying to build around guys that have like 20 plus point per game potential with Halliburton and Mathurin, that's a good player to get. He could be a glue guy, and it can be even more than that. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I had no idea what to do with the Wizards pick at 8. And I could have gone in a lot of directions. I thought about a lot of players. I ended up going with Anthony Black, because Anthony Black to me is the best player available that can be like a point guard. And that's like the one thing they need. Like Monte Morris is not a long-term answer. You know, Johnny Davis, we'll see. He actually did show a lot of potential, not a lot of potential. He showed promise down the stretch when he actually got minutes. So I do think they might have something there with him, but he's not a point guard. Anthony Black reminds me a lot of Josh Giddey. Now, he's not completely like Josh Giddey, but like there are elements of like the connecting passing, some of the scoring questions you had with Giddey entering the league, kind of have them with Anthony Black, even though I think in both cases they showed a bit more scoring promise than they were led on to believe by the media. But I think that, you know, a similar role could be what Anthony Black is in the NBA. Anthony Black himself has said he likes Josh Giddey a lot. He bases a lot of his game off what Josh Giddey does, and that's a good player to do it. You know, tall, really smart passer. I think Anthony Black actually has a lot more defensive potential. Like, Anthony Black will be a good defender within like a year or two in the NBA, in my opinion. He is somebody I think can be a good scorer in due time, and someone that just fits. Like with Jarvis Walker, he doesn't need to score a lot to have a big impact, but he is capable of scoring. I don't know if he has like as much scoring capability as a Jarvis Walker, but I do think he has room to grow in this area. And I think like for the Wizards, you can use a guy like this. and he's good value. He's a top 10 player in the draft. I would have him somewhere like that 7 to like 10 range. And again, at pick 8, that would be a really good pick. At pick number 9, the Utah Jazz are going to take one of my favorite players in the draft. And what would be my favorite pick if it actually happens in the real draft? And Cassandra Wallace going number 9 to Utah, because it would just be a great fit. Wallace is a guard that I legitimately believe is the best one-and-done defensive guard prospect of the last 15 years, at the very least. He's that good defensively. And I'll put it this way. If his offense was as good as his defense, he would be the number 2 player in this draft over Scoot Henderson. That's how special of a defensive prospect he is. His instincts are rare, his feel for the game, the motor, he can be productive, good lateral mover, good foot speed and quickness in that area. He just has everything like you want in an elite defensive guard. I don't think he'll be one right away, because it takes guards a little bit to adjust in all aspects of the game. It's the hardest position in the league to make that adjustment to, especially on defense, because you're going to be facing guys like Steph, Garland, Kyrie, Dame, LaMelo, John Morant if he plays. So you're facing tough players. Like, you're not going to have an easy matchups. Trae Young's another name. He's definitely hard to guard. So it will take time for him to adjust. But I think maybe by midway his rookie year, he will be a positive impact defender right away. And I think he's going to be an all-defense kind of guy for a very long time. I think he could be a Marcus Smart level defender. And Marcus Smart's one of the best defensive guards of the last 20 years. He's that special on defense. And he's a solid offensive player. He's a player, I wouldn't say he's bad, but I wouldn't say he's good in all areas of offense. He's solid and has room to grow. And maybe he will, because all Kentucky players, they seem to get held back by something because of the system. And, we saw with Bam, Cat, Booker, Hero, SGA to a certain extent. Really the only ones that didn't get held back by the system were Jamal Murray and Malik Monk. So maybe Wallace has more offensive potential. Tyrese Maxey is the biggest example of being held back by the system and showing more in the NBA than he did in college. So that might be the case, but we have to see it to believe it. But defense alone would make Wallace a lottery pick. And if he becomes an average offensive player, he could return borderline all-star potential. That's how good his defense is. He gets to be on a team that has Chris Dunn. Say what you want about Chris Dunn's NBA career. Chris Dunn is an awesome mentor to have for a player like Wallace, because Chris Dunn's a really good defensive guard, and he's grown as an offensive player. Even though he's almost 30 years old, he has still shown improvement as an offensive player and has had a bounce back career. And I hope it works out for him, but for him to get a chance to mentor potentially the next great defensive guard, that would be awesome. I like his fit there. And it just makes a lot of sense to take him here. Wallace is a top 10 player in the draft, in my opinion. I think he could go higher than this. I think he could go lower than this, depending on how interviews go, depending on team fit. But 9 to Utah makes a lot of sense. At pick 10, the Mavericks are up. I know they probably wish they landed in the top 4, but they're picking here. They're taking Taylor Hendricks. Hendricks could go higher than this. I know the NBA is really high on a player like him. Somebody that, block shots, point of attack defense, can stretch the floor, can grow as an overall offensive player. There's just a lot of upside with him in general as a 6'8", 6'9" guy that can be a two-way player. So he fits well with this Dallas team. I think he would fit well with Luka. So it just makes too much sense. That's been the story with almost all of these picks after the top 2. Yes, those 2 picks make sense. Those are the top 2 prospects in the draft, and 2 of the 5 best prospects of the last 10 years. But Blazers, that pick makes sense for them for many reasons. Rockets, it makes sense for fit and upside reason. Pistons, it makes sense. It fits a position of need. High upside pick. Magic. Makes sense. Upside plus fit with team. Pacers. Upside fit with team. Wizards. It just makes sense. It's what they need the most. Jazz. Another pick. It just makes sense. And with Hendricks, it makes sense as well. They need a guy that can stretch the floor at that 4 spot. Basically, what I'm saying is they need a better version of what Christian Wood is. And that's where I think Hendricks can be. He can do like all the things Christian Wood does in offense, be more efficient doing it, while also being a significantly better defensive player. That's what I think Hendricks can be. And that's why you should take him at 10 and probably let Christian Wood walk. At pick 11, the Magic are back up, and they're going to take Grady Dick here. He just makes a lot of sense for them. You know, one of the better shooters in the class. I think he has more on-ball potential to give him credit for. Likely won't be a starter for them. I think a starter will be the starter that they pick. And at pick 11, they just get a guy that can contribute in many ways, can start if needed, but likely will come off the bench as a floor spacer, as a rim runner, transition threat, can somewhat create for himself, create off the dribble, but would play well next to Paulo, play well next to Franz, Asaru now, Wendell. And off the bench, you know, he would actually fit really well with Cole Anthony because of his ability to space the floor and play off ball. So, I like the fit a lot with Orlando here. They need a shooter. There are a bunch of good shooters. This is like a draft that has like 2 good things in it. Like, really good athletes. Like, probably the most athletic draft class I've ever seen. And really good shooters. Like, Grady Dick might not even be the best shooter in this class, which really says something because he is an elite shooting prospect. Yes, I also know he has a funny name as well, but this pick really just makes too much sense for them. In a way, it reminds me of like the Warriors taking Moody, if they actually used Moody, because Moody is a good player. It just took the Warriors forever to figure out that he was a polished player ready to play right away, and it took them till this year's playoffs to realize that. I don't think he's the defender that Moody is. I actually don't even think he has like the upside that Moody does. I think Moody has a chance to be like a really good defensive player and offensive player. Grady Dick is just not a good defensive player like at all. But what he brings as a scorer, shooter, on and off the ball, I think it would fit well with Orlando. At pick 12, I have the OKC Thunder taking a slightly shocking pick, and that would be Dariq Whitehead from Duke. Now, Whitehead started the year as a projected top 5 pick. I had him as number 3 on my board going into the cycle. He didn't have a great year. He dealt with injuries. And he's fallen a bit on boards. But to me, despite everything that went on, he's still a lottery prospect. I'm not saying he's like the number 3 prospect that I thought he was. But I would still take him in the lottery. At the very latest, mid-first round. And in the very highest, like, I would start considering a pick like 8. Like, that's how good I think he can be. He's still one of the youngest players in the draft. Doesn't turn 19 until August 1st of 2023. I almost said his full birthday. Wow. But he's still young, and he does have a defined skill set. Off the bat, he will be a good shooter. He was a good shooter right away, despite like all the injuries he suffered, despite like the inconsistency in his role at Duke and everything that went on there. He was still a good shooter. 43% on 3.5 attempts per game in 20.6 minutes per game. Per 36, that's 6.1 for 43%. That's really good. Like, off bat, he will be good. Catch and shoot, off ball, off movement, things like that. And he does have on-ball creating juice. He did flash the ability to put the basketball on the floor and attack the basket. He was a bit rusty. He clearly wasn't the athlete that he was in high school this year at Duke because of the injuries. We'll see how that affects him long term. But one, if he gets back to what he was at the, if he gets back healthy, he fully recovers from the injury, because it really didn't feel like he had time to recover from the injuries at Duke. But if he gets back to what he was as an athlete in high school, at pick 12, this will be a steal. Because if Dariq is like what he was as an athlete in high school, while being the shooter he was in college, and like having like more juice as a player, he would be like a top 5 pick. Like, that's how good I think the talent is with them. You don't just lose the ability to create shots the way he was in high school. And he wasn't playing against a bunch of scrubs in high school either. He played at Montford Academy. So, He was playing against other top-ranked teams. And he's been at Montverde since he was in like the 8th grade. So at practice, he's going up against guys. Like he's going up against RJ Barrett when he was the number 1 player in the country and projected to be the number 1 pick before the season started at Duke. Cade Cunningham, number 1 pick. Moses Moody was getting rotation minutes in the playoffs this year. A lottery pick on a title contending team. You know, Scotty Barnes, rookie of the year, top 4 pick. Daylon Sharp, first round pick. You know, he faced off against like Precious Achiuwa was there. So he practiced with and against guys that played in the NBA since he was 13 years old. I'm willing to bet on him based off the age, based off the physical tools, 6'6", 220 pounds, decently long arms, his ability to shoot the basketball, the motor and wiring he has as a player. He's a very competitive guy. You could tell, like, after they lost the March Madness, he was, like, visibly just frustrated, not only with, like, the game, but how his season went. Like, you can tell, like, this is not how he wanted the season to go. And it's not his fault the season went the way it did. Like, that wasn't fully within his control. Like, injuries suck. And that should be factored in. Now, I'm not saying this to say he should still go, like, top 5, obviously. He's going 12. But, you know, I'm willing to bet on the 18-year-old that 6'6", 220 pounds has shown, like, on-ball creating potential and is a good shooter right away. I think for OKC, that's a player we're taking a risk on. He may never get back to what he was as an athlete, but, like, the skill doesn't go away. And at that young of an age, I'm willing to bet on him at pick 12. I would bet on him maybe even higher than this. And I'll say this, if he gets to the Lakers at pick 17, and he gets to work with Phil Handy, watch out. Because that has a chance to be special. But for OKC, you take a player that can contribute right away, as a shooter, as somebody that's a high character guy, and you also get someone that has potential to be more than that. Like, this is someone that has potential to grow as a shooter. Not as like an on-ball creator. Like, and if he can do that, maybe get to learn from SGA a little bit. If you're rolling out a lineup down the line when Chet like adds a bit more muscle to his frame of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, potentially like a developed Dariq Whitehead, Jalen Williams at the 4, like J-Dub, that one, the one that almost won Rookie of the Year, and Chet Holmgren at the 5, that's a starting 5. Like, if everything goes right with Dariq, that has a chance to be scary. It's not a guarantee, but OKC is in a spot where they can take that risk. And I like his upside a bit more than a decent amount of guys still left on the board. And I think he's going to be a better pro than he was college player. And if he actually falls to the 20s in this draft, there are going to be teams in the late lottery in the mid-first round that are going to be kicking themselves in a few years if he develops. At pick 13, the Toronto Raptors will take Bryce Sensabaugh from the Ohio State University. I like Bryce Sensabaugh. He's one of my favorite players to watch in this class. He's just a big, physical, scoring wing, 6'6", 235 pounds, built like a bowling ball, and has all the scoring tools in the world. He's somebody that's a good shooter. 40.5%. Wow, I'm mixing up my words here. But yeah, 40.5%, 4.5 attempts per 36. That's nearly 41% on 7 attempts per game. Can create his own shot, dribble, can play off the ball. You know, physical, can attack the basket, play bully ball, draws fouls. Not a good passer, does need to work in that area. But what he does as a scorer, I think would be like really fun with this Toronto team. They have all the versatile guys need. They have Siakam, they have Scotty Barnes, they have OG Anunoby. We'll see how long like OG Anunoby and Siakam are there, but I think that a scorer like Bryce Sensabaugh would work really well with a guy like Scotty Barnes. So I just like that pairing long term as like your wing forward duo. I think it will be a high upside pick. I think Sensabaugh has a ton of potential. I think he has like top 10 potential in this class. Not top 10 in the league. That would be a bit much, but you know, I do think he could go top 10 in this class. I do think he's that talented. There's about 15 to 16 guys that I think are worthy of going top 10. This is a very good draft class. And to get Bryce Sensabaugh here, I think it would be a good pick. There are a few other guys I like on the board for them here, but Bryce Sensabaugh, I just think it would be a really fun fit, and I think a good long-term upside pick as well. And at pick 14, the New Orleans Pelicans are up. They're going to take Keyonte George from Baylor. I understand that Keyonte George doesn't have the greatest numbers in the world in terms of efficiency. 37.6% from the field, 33.8% from 3, 52.42 shooting percentage. But when you watch him play, you see a lot better of a prospect on tape. He reminds you of Anthony Edwards in one specific area, not completely. If he was like Anthony Edwards, he would go a lot higher in this class. But what he reminds me of when I compare him to Ant was, when they were prospects, yes, there's frustrations on tape. And Ant was a very frustrating prospect to watch on tape. He had awful shot selects in college. Like it was really hard to watch. But despite the inefficiency, they showed all the tools on tape. And that's why Ant went 1, and that's why Ant was like my easy number 2 prospect in that class, behind LaMelo. And it's why I think Keyonte George is worthy of going in the lottery. Because you see all the tools. He's big, he's physical. He's listed at 184 pounds, he's closer to like 210 pounds. He's a really strong player. And he showed more potential outside of scoring as well. He is a good passer. The assist to turnover ratio wasn't good, but he showed more willingness and ability as a passer. He showed a lot more defensively than he did in high school, to the point where I think he can be a good defender in the NBA. He can be a connecting passer and be a good defender potentially. He's good at drawing charges. And I think playing off of good players will make him more efficient. Like playing off of Ingram, playing off of CJ, potentially Zion, we'll see with him. It will make him more efficient. He averaged nearly 7 3-point attempts per game, so at 33.8% in 28.6 minutes per game. Not a great mark, but when you look at the fact he's taking a bunch of difficult shots out to dribble, it makes the efficiency more understandable. He's also good at drawing fouls. The Pelicans, like one thing I noticed on tape with them was the fact that they needed more scorers outside of Ingram and CJ, because CJ can be inconsistent. Ingram can only do so much, and he's a great player, but he can only do so much. And Zion, the health right now and the injury concerns are there. They need someone that can score, and that's Keyonte George. He's a great scoring prospect. He has all the tools in the world, and he can be even more than that. But I do understand the concerns with the efficiency right now. It's why he goes a bit lower for me in this mock draft. Because I know, like I said, Ant's my number 2, despite the fact he was inefficient when he was in college. The difference is, George has good intangibles as a scorer and good physical tools. Anthony Edwards had elite scoring intangibles and elite physical tools. So that's the difference. But Keyonte George, another name like Bryce Sensabaugh, like Derek Whitehead, basically anyone that went 11 through 14, they could easily go top 10. I have really high grades on all of those guys. But that was the final pick of this mock draft. But that's the end of this mock draft. If you made it to this point, thank you so much. Again, haven't already, subscribe, do all those things. Would be a big help to me. Helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. Helps the channel grow so I can make more content for you guys consistently in the future. Let me know what you think about this mock draft in the comment section below. Who do you think went too high? What picks did you like? What players do you think went too low? What players do you think were left out that should be here? What do you think's gonna happen? I would love to hear all that in the comment section below. But with that being said, have a nice day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.